Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Pooja Viswanathan, CEO and co-founder of Braze Mobility, an organization that has created blind spot sensors that can be added to any wheelchair, transforming it into a smart wheelchair. Like this video if you enjoy our show, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Pooja Viswanathan, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
So, Pooja, we're going to get to your work around Braze mobility and all those things, but I was looking a little bit about you and your background, and you like solving escape rooms. And I was thinking, isn't your work challenging enough? Don't you just want to watch some stand-up comedy or something?
Yeah, it's I guess I'm slightly obsessed with solving problems. So clearly I
Okay.
can't get enough.
No, I mean, because I look at you and I'd love to know a little bit more about at least the academic part to start. We talk about solving problems and challenging work. You've done doctoral work, postdoctoral work, and a commercialization postdoctoral fellow, which I'm not actually familiar with. So tell us a little bit about, the education that you've done and how that's been a part of your journey.
I ended up doing a lot of research, but that was never really the intention. I really just set out to solve a problem, and it was a problem that I came across shortly after my undergraduate degree. While I was still doing my undergrad in computer science, I was actually doing an option in bioinformatics. So I knew that I wanted to be somewhere kind of at the intersection of healthcare and technology, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so bioinformatics at the time was, very new. It was a sexy program. So I thought, okay, it sounds really cool. It sounds cool to say I'm in a bioinformatics program, and it was always nice to kind of explain what that was. But when I got into it and I started doing a lot of bioinformatics research, I realized that I didn't really have the patience that life sciences requires. So, I mean, I guess, like an example of something that you would do as a bioinformatics researcher is that you're using computer science technology to predict protein structure, for example. You might use algorithms to try and figure out how a certain protein works, how it folds. And then that, of course, has a lot of implications for all kinds of things like drug discovery and disease and
Right.
and that sort of thing. But it's very much about doing a lot of experiments, running a lot of simulations, and I just found that I wasn't patient enough for that work. I was really wanting to build something. I really wanted to make something tangible, and I wanted to see the benefits of it in my lifetime, right? And I felt like
Okay.
I couldn't really get that. And so I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who are able to do that, sometimes not even being able to really see the effects of their work until decades after, sometimes even after their lifetime. But wasn't for me. And so I ended up switching into assistive technology because I just really by accident stumbled upon an assistive technology seminar, which is essentially a seminar where they were talking about how technology could be used to help people with disabilities. And so this was a really new field for me. I was there completely by accident, really more because I smelled food. And as any student will tell you, free food is pretty much, the jackpot for us. And so I walked in, wanted to eat all the food there, and then just thought out of courtesy that maybe I should walk around and see the work that people were doing. And it ended up being, all this great assistive technology research that I actually realized, what, I think that's a better fit for me. I can still use a lot of my background and interests, but apply it into a space where I felt like I could get more shorter term impact or contribute shorter term impact. So that's kind of what made me decide to make the switch. And then I ended up connecting with researchers in the space, ended up in a summer research program. So I was doing summer research for a professor at the time at the University of Toronto, who is working in this area of smart wheelchairs. So the idea was that, there are a lot of long-term care residents who are slumped over in manual wheelchairs. They don't have the strength to propel themselves in those manual wheelchairs, but they also weren't being allowed to use power wheelchairs, so the motorized wheelchairs. And the reason for
Right.
that was the safety concerns. Operating a power wheelchair requires a certain level of cognitive functioning. A lot of long-term care residents tend to have dementia. And so all of that and a whole lot of other reasons, the staff was always concerned for safety. And so motorized wheelchairs were often not even permitted to be used in these sorts of facilities. And so the idea of this research was then to look at how we could bring some of the technology that was very new at the time in the automotive industry. We were just starting to see sensor technology being applied in cars and so on. So the idea was, well, can we use similar technology and make wheelchairs safer for individuals in long-term care facilities to be able to operate them? So that was really what started me on this journey. So I never really set out to do a PhD and a postdoc and all of that, but I became so obsessed with this problem that I felt like I needed to solve. And so at the time, the only people that were working on it were researchers because it was such pioneering work. And so I started working in that area, did my PhD, and then at the end of my PhD, I remember I did some TV and radio interviews, and I started actually getting emails and calls, voicemails at our lab phone number, asking about when this technology would be commercialized. And of course, I had no idea because I was an academic and I knew nothing about starting a business. But I was so disturbed by the fact that I didn't have an answer for them that I decided that I wasn't going to do any more interviews until I actually found a path to get this to market. And so I ended up then taking on this commercialization postdoc, which was very, very novel. Even today, it's not something that is very common, but I ended up being a part of this network called AgeWell, which is a network of centers of excellence in Canada. Their purpose was actually to promote commercialization of technologies for older adults with dementia, or older adults in general, actually. But of course, there was also a lot of focus on older adults with dementia. And so it was just a great fit for me because what I was able to do with that is have a postdoc fellowship, but not have to do the traditional research that a lot of the other postdocs were doing, and instead really focus on how I was going to get this research into the hands of real users, how to figure out the path to market.
And just to double click on that, I mean, again, I hadn't heard of the commercialization postdoc. Is that becoming more common? Because I just, as you describe your journey and the breakthrough work that you did and you or your colleagues did, it just seems that that's one of the brick walls that there is, not just in Canadian universities, but generally. Is that happening more often?
You know what? I still think it's fairly uncommon. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact, and again, even though I did this postdoctoral fellow, a commercialized postdoctoral fellow, ultimately I ended up kind of leaving academia to start a business because even with that, I still hit a brick wall because I found that
Got
there
it.
were still some conflicts in terms of objectives between academics and people in industry, right? Because there's still, in my case, I was very lucky that I had a supervisor who was very encouraging of me doing all these things, but there's still some limitations, right? As a postdoc, you can't hold funding. Oftentimes, even when you do get grants, there's restrictions on the line items and what you can spend that money on, and it tends to be, generally focused on recruiting grad students. And then now you're looking at, okay, well, what are the objectives of a grad student? Well, it's to publish, your dissertation and then have all of these peer-reviewed publications. So those don't always directly line up with getting a product and market, right? Because a lot of times the work that you're doing in research is really sort of pie in the sky stuff. You're really pushing the envelope, and to really bring that into a real product that's going to work in the real world often involves solving some really hard engineering problems, which aren't necessarily attractive to academics, right? Because that's not always path breaking sort of stuff, but it involves still building a practical, affordable solution. And there's so many other problems. There's sales problems, marketing problems. There's all these other problems that you need to solve in
Right.
order to get something out on market, which is completely outside of the realm of an academic often, right? So So it was really interesting because at the end of all of that, ultimately, it allowed me to do a lot of the groundwork, but I still had to go off and start a company to really bring the product out into the real world.
Well, you've done that very successfully. You crossed that bridge. You're one of the 50 women in robotics you need to know. So congratulations on that. And let's talk about that bridge and where it's led to, because Braze Mobility, I was really struck, as it says, the first blind spot sensor system that can be added to any wheelchair. So there's a lot of different technologies going on through here. There's the basic motorized wheelchair, but I'm guessing that the sensor and the connectivity between sensor and motion and stopping that motion, that must be really quite difficult in that circumstance.
Yeah, so it's that's an interesting comment there because so just to kind of give you the sense also of some of the insights that we learned along the way. So when I started doing the research, the kind of product that we were building was exactly the sort of components that you mentioned, which was, okay, we're going to take very similar, again, inspired by, at the time, the automotive industry. We were really thinking about it in terms of, let's get this data from the sensors, let's tap into the electronics of the wheelchair, and then kind of, essentially your automated emergency braking technology that you have in cars, or like steering correction, or even fully self-driving wheelchairs was kind of the stuff that we were working on, which was very attractive for academics because there were so many novel, hard problems to solve there from a control aspect, right? Like, how do you control the chair accurately enough that it's safe? Now, what was really, really interesting for me in terms of the insights was when I stepped out of the lab and I started to actually talk to real wheelchair users. I realized that the problem was a lot broader than what I'd initially thought it to be. So when I started this work, I was looking at a very specific population. It was the population in long-term care. A lot of them had significant cognitive deficits. And so we then, were really looking at the problem of, these are individuals who are unable to safely drive their chair because they're not able to control the chair, maybe because they don't quite understand how to control the chair. Maybe they don't quite understand that they need to stop when they see an obstacle. So those are the types of challenges that we were trying to solve with that technology that we were building. What we realized when we started to go beyond that very specific population was wheelchair users, especially motorized wheelchair users across the board, regardless of their cognitive functioning, were still constantly running into things. I mean, we were going into homes of people who own motorized wheelchairs, and their homes were just just damage everywhere, right? Like baseboards ripped out, there was dents on the doorways. And these were they were high functioning individuals, right? Like they were using motorized wheelchairs, but cognitively there were no issues there. Sometimes even visually there were no issues. So it really raised then the question of, well, what's going on here? Am I missing something? Because here's safety still an issue, but it's not for the reasons that we thought. And so what we actually discovered from a lot of customer discovery and looking at real users was that there is across the board an issue of spatial awareness when using wheelchairs. And now thinking about it was so simple and it should have been really intuitive, but it wasn't to us. And the issue really is I can demonstrate it right now sitting in this office chair. If I try to look at the floor behind me while remaining seated, and assuming I don't cheat and swivel because I'm in a swivel chair, but if I just try to look behind me, I really can't see anything back there. And I don't even have any significant upper body mobility issues. So, the chair itself creates a massive blind spot. And that's what we were seeing, is that with individuals who use motorized wheelchairs, and now we've even seen that with manual wheelchair users, we've seen it with scooter users, sometimes even walker users, with a lot of mobility devices, the device itself tends to create these areas around the device that it's really difficult to see. And so for these users, it wasn't actually a problem of them not being able to control the chair. It was just an issue of having no clue, especially in the rear, of just what's back there. And what they really needed was just that increased spatial awareness, not for the chair to take over and do the operation for them. And that was a really, really big insight. And it completely caused us to shift our focus then from semi-autonomous or autonomous wheelchairs to looking at, well, how do we give people that spatial awareness so that they can remain in control, but actually feel an increased sense of spatial awareness so then they can make more informed decisions.
One, I love the discussion of what happens when you leave lab and go in situ, because I mean
Yeah.
that's always eye-opening, and obviously it was in this case. Let me understand spatial awareness. What comes next, though? How are you made aware? How do you know, what the distance is between you and, I don't know if it is an impediment, a wall, or whatever. How does that all work?
Yeah, so I let me give you a quick sort of summary of how the system works. So essentially, what the sensors do is they detect obstacles, and then they communicate the location and proximity of the obstacle to the user. And there's three different ways that they do that. So they do it through lights, sounds, and vibrations. So we use three different modalities, and that way, we're able to cater to a very diverse population, because oftentimes we have customers who might have vision impairment or might have hearing loss, or both. So we really want to make sure that people have three modalities available to them, and then they can choose which modality they want. And so then just by looking at our interface visually, they're able to tell where the obstacle is and how close. And we do that to two different colors. So yellow light, if it's a certain distance away, and the red light if it's closer. So again, based very much
Right.
on the concept of traffic lights, something that people are very familiar with. And the reason we did that, of course, was again drawing from my research with individuals with cognitive impairment. It's well known that individuals like that might have trouble learning new things, but they still remember things that they had learned earlier and can still, kind of intuitively know what's going on. And so when we had tested these sorts of modalities, even with individuals with mild to moderate cognitive impairment, they were still able to tell, oh, if I see a yellow light, that means I need to slow down. Or if I feel a vibration, that's a warning. That means, something's happening. I should probably slow down and pay attention to what's happening around me. And so, we really tried to draw on those principles, kind of universal design principles, and really try to keep the interface as simple and as intuitive as possible, because we knew we were going to have a wide range of users, not just in terms of ability, but in terms of age as well. Like we have clients that are as young as like 6 years old, and up to 90 plus years of age, right? So that's a huge demographic.
So Pooja, show us the sensors that we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a handheld sort of portable version here. So what I'll do is I'm just holding up some of our components that I'll go through and explain how everything works. So we'll start off with the component that I'm holding right now, which is what we call the Sentina. This is the main sensor array that is typically mounted to the rear of the mobility device. And it has about 180 degrees of horizontal coverage and about 45 to 50 degrees of vertical coverage. So the idea is, as I mentioned, this is typically watching out for obstacles in the rear. And then the next component that I'm holding right now is what we called an echo head. It is a smaller sensor. It's really just, an individual sensor from our array, and it has about a 45 to 50 degree cone coverage. So that's horizontal and vertical. And it's typically mounted in the front of the chair, pointed out. And so that is essentially detecting obstacles going through doorways, elevators, tight spaces, things where we generally find clients have challenges navigating safely. So that's the echo head. And then finally, the component that I'm holding right now is called the controller. It is the component that displays the visual feedback. It has the switches and the buttons to control the auditory and the vibration feedback. And it can also be used to turn the system on. So I'm going to go ahead and press the big white button, and essentially that will turn on the system. And the blue light that is displayed in the middle row of lights there is indicating that the system is on and that it is in mode 1, which in this case is the short range mode. So we have two modes. So they can really be anything that can be programmed by the client themselves. But by default, the two modes are short range and long range. So I'll explain how those different modes work. So pulling the sensors away from the laptop right now, we don't really see any lights. But as I move the sensors towards my laptop, we'll start to notice some yellow lights pop up in the bottom row there. And so that yellow light in the middle is telling me that the sensors are seeing something. The middle of the sensor is seeing the laptop directly in front. So That's the yellow light saying that there's an obstacle detected in the middle. And as I move my hand from left to right, we're going to see some red lights that are saying that now an obstacle is being detected within a foot. So while the yellow light lights up when obstacles are within 2 feet, the red light lights up when obstacles are detected within 1 foot. So 1 foot and 2 feet are the different thresholds that are set in the short range mode. And then all I need to do is, if say I'm in a mall or a public space where I might need to detect things further away, then all I do is toggle that big white button again, and we go into long range mode. And now all of those distances are doubled. So instead of 1 foot for the red light, it's 2 feet for red, and instead of 2 feet for the yellow light, it's 4 feet for the yellow light. So everything is doubled, and we're detecting obstacles further away. So it's nice to have these two different modes, because the client might have an area where they're in a really tight space, and then another area where maybe things are further away. So that really gives them the option to have those different profiles that they can toggle between, but also completely customize those. So we can change each of these distances for the sensors from anywhere from a couple of inches all the way out to 6 feet. So there's a pretty wide range of obstacles, of distances that can be detected. So that's the visual feedback. And then the second mode of feedback is auditory. So for that, all I have to do is press the switch there, and now we've activated auditory feedback. So what we'll notice is the auditory feedback does not get activated in that yellow zone, because we don't want to start to give people beeping, or start the system beeping excessively. That would just drive people crazy. Mm-hmm. And so the auditory alerts only go off in that short range mode. So there's auditory feedback then in that inner red zone. And then finally, we have vibration alerts, which again can be switched on or off with the third switch on the controller. And when it's turned on, we activate the vibration alerts. The vibration pads look like what I'm holding up here. So it kind of looks like a paddle. It's pretty thin. It's essentially a foam pad that can be inserted in the seat cushion, or in the backrest, or in the armrests. And you usually have 3 of them. So we have one on the left, one in the center, and one on the right. And that way, if a client is going through the doorway, for example, and if they're too close to the right side of the doorway, the right side of their chair will vibrate. And if they're too close to the left side of their chair will vibrate. So it's really nice, because they get that directional feedback to tell them how close they are, but also where on the, on the side of the chair the obstacle is. So that's the last modality feedback. So it's a really simple system with 3 modalities. The interface is very intuitive, and this way they've got different ways that they can tell the location as well as the proximity of obstacles.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And as you said, you're now shipping these units around the world.
That's right. If anyone's interested, they just have to go to our website, www.brazemobility.com. They can either go to the contact us section, or they can request a quote. And once they enter in all of their information, we'll be happy to contact them. And then, we will connect them with the partners depending on where they are geographically, to make sure that they are able to get their hands on a system, and hopefully have the system help them navigate fully, independently, and safely.
And so talk to me more about the demographic, because it's not just the age group, but who are the types of users? I mean, my understanding is you've made great strides with, say, the military.
So we do work with a lot of veterans. We have a lot of veterans that use wheelchairs, and so and the VA, the Veterans Affairs, was definitely one of our first customers. So they were one of the first. We had a therapist in the VA that I still remember. It was the first show that we went to where we had kind of demonstrated our product, and a therapist came up to me and said, "Where have you guys been for the last 10 years? Because I've tried to actually build," he was a rehab engineer himself, so he had tried to build something that hadn't really worked as well. And he was really looking for a solution like this, because so many of his veteran clients had these sorts of issues while navigating in their chairs. So that was certainly one of kind of the first groups of clients that we worked with. But I mean, really, we work across the board with anyone who's a wheelchair user. And like I said, now we've even started to work with scooter users and walker users. It's really anyone that uses these mobility devices that needs that spatial awareness. And it's just about anyone, right? Just as I mentioned, there's such little visibility. We did a we did actually, there was a peer-reviewed publication from a couple of years ago where the participants in the study were actually power wheelchair users, motorized wheelchair users, all with very different diagnoses. They were in their chair for different reasons. And regardless of why, what their diagnosis was or what their experience with their wheelchair was, the average accuracy that they all showed in detecting obstacles in the rear was as low as 44%. That was the average accuracy without any sensors. And so if they just did what they would usually do, which is maybe try to do a shoulder check or something like that,
Yeah.
they only had about 44% accuracy. And with the sensors, they had 96% accuracy on average. So
Wow.
it is just night and day. And it really, I think that really kind of supports anecdotes that we've heard from people when we ask them what it's like to back up. They are really don't know. I mean, a lot of them are just guessing and, crossing their fingers and hoping that they're not going to back up into something. But there's very, very limited spatial awareness, especially in the rear. And we see, again, depending on what their diagnosis is or what their challenges are, there might be issues also with detecting things in their periphery or even directly in front of them. And, depth perception can be an issue. Individuals who have limited upper body mobility, so maybe they just can't physically turn their head. So there's all kinds of diagnoses where that might be true. Vision impairments, cerebral palsy, again, a lot of diagnoses where there just is some sort of impact on their upper mobility or even just general mobility, right? So if they're not really able to turn, and even when they are able to turn, there still might be limitations. So we really do see a lot of different diagnoses across the board. But what we're finding is really it's more so as long as the client is cognitively is able to respond to alerts, they tend to be a good fit for our product, right? I think where we can't really help the client is if they are unable to respond to a visual alert or an audio alert or a tactile alert, where there might be behavioral issues, where again, accidents might just be a kind of a way of them with some of those behavioral issues. Like sometimes we actually have clients who actually want to hit something, right? It's just a way of kind of acting out aggression and things like that. And so those are problems that we can't solve that are outside of the realm of what we can do. But with a lot of clients who, are safety conscious and have that, even if they are mild to moderately cognitively impaired, but they are able to respond, then that's still a great fit.
What I love too, I mean, you mentioned using your sensors with walkers even. So that to me, I just found fascinating because and I'm thinking mostly of the elderly. There's a fear factor. There's a lack of mobility, obviously, but there's also a fear factor, and a true lack of left-right mobility. That must be a wonderful application.
Yeah, certainly, and that's a fairly new demographic for us, so it's really going to be interesting to explore that space further. But we've certainly seen again walker users with some sort of vision impairment or depth perception issues, right? And they're just really worried about constantly bumping into things or into people. And again, in the facilities, this is a huge problem, right? Because with older adults in the facilities, even just a small, a bump or something could actually lead to a fall, right? So you really do want to make sure that the residents there you're trying to, to do your best to increase safety in those sorts of settings. So again, it's very, very interesting population there, and something that staff are constantly worried about. Risks of fall in the elderly are really, really high.
Are you able, have you ever contemplated, I mean, the alert when something is bumped? Maybe in the same way, obviously, that a car is, or even at home, with a mobility device, and you say a small bump may have a major impact on somebody. Is that in contemplation, if you can speak about it, or?
Yeah, do you mean like in actually changing the speed of the chair or like actually stopping or something like that? Like you mean actually
Well, there's that, and or frankly, and I'm thinking of some people with life alert or some other kind of thing that says
Oh,
I've
okay, yeah.
fallen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been another, it's definitely been on our list of things of, a lot of things that we've heard from clients. I mean, we've heard from clients who have fallen, in in an alleyway and then just been stuck and not been able to call for help and been stuck there for hours before someone found them. So those are all really, really big concerns. And so absolutely, I think those are all on the roadmap. We have a lot of these sorts of challenges that clients have brought to us. And I think a lot of us don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. We have just no idea, what sort
Right.
of challenges there are. One of the big things that I'm actually working on right now is actually also looking at the built environment. Because it's great to have sensors on these mobility devices and to be providing all this feedback, but ultimately we really need to be making our cities, our environment more accessible so that it's just easier to navigate in the first place. So we, rather than creating these afterthoughts and trying to build onto the devices to try and keep people safe, it's like, well, why not just build an environment that's just safer for people to navigate in? So that's for me personally, that's a huge area of R&D that I'll be working on for the next several years. But I think there's just so many unsolved problems in the area of accessibility. There's so much work to be done that I don't think we're ever going to be out of problems to solve in this area.
Pooja, thank you so much for this. I mean, the time has gone so quickly. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure hearing more about Braze Mobility. Your passion and your energy just comes right through the screen. As an entrepreneur, and your work is so important, and I love that you've bridged from the lab to in situ and to creating something. I hope you take the time once in a while as an entrepreneur to say, wow, this is quite remarkable, and just appreciate where you are and what you've done, because 30 years in, I think it took me a little while to figure out those moments.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we try as a team for sure to celebrate, little wins that we have, and it's definitely very rewarding to see your work actually help people, and in whatever small way we can, to be improving quality of life.
Thank you again for joining us on Say Hi to the Future.
Thanks so much.